Hi, everyone who is here face to face and everyone who has joined us online. Happy World Social Work Day. Yay, for us. I'm really so delighted to see you all here and to have this event to celebrate our profession. I would just like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting here on Wurundjeri country and that this land was never ceded by the Aboriginal owners. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge that some people are joining us online and from other Aboriginal lands. So my job here today is a very short one. What I would like to do now is to introduce our two compeers, the wonderful Maureen, Associate Professor Maureen Long and the superbly gorgeous Chloe Dillon. So I shall hand over to you and look forward to hearing what our fantastic panel's got to say about intergenerational social work. Thank you. Oh, just to point to, this is being recorded because we think that we'll be able to use it for teaching. Keep that in mind. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Sarah. Okay, welcome everybody. Yes, and happy Social Work Day. So Chloe's going to start by introducing each of our panellists today, and then we've got a series of questions that we're going to go through together, and then we will open it up for your questions. So, beautiful. Chloe, would you like to introduce our panel?
I would. I think, Sarah, you might have just taken the other half of the panellist bios.
Yes.
So I'll start with the two that I've got here. So in no particular order, we have Emeritus Professor Margarita Frederico. Margarita is a social work practitioner and researcher whose particular field of interest is child and family wellbeing. Professor Marg is a leader in our profession. She's a social work educator in both Australia and the US. She's previously served as the head of social work at La Trobe, among other universities, and as the chief social worker at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Marg is a life member and a former national director of the AASW. We have Saly Alman. Saly is a mental health practitioner and social worker with the Western English Language School. A graduate of RMIT Social Work, Saly has commenced her career working for Centrelink and has also worked with Headspace as a clinician. She's completed a master's degree in public policy and is a founding member of the Anti-Racist Social Work Collective. Saly will be familiar to many final year students as a sessional academic in the policy advocacy subject. Right, got my second sheet. We have Amanda Tully. Amanda is a Gomeroi social worker from Maureen, who graduated from the La Trobe degree in 2015. She's worked in a wide range of sectors, including hospital, community health, Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and NGOs. Amanda is currently working in child protection as an Aboriginal family-led decision-making practitioner. And we have Jaryd Stobaus. Jaryd is a relatively recent graduate of our La Trobe degree. He currently works as a mental health practitioner at a specialist school and also teaches approaches to practice in the final year at the Bundoora campus. Jaryd is a former student representative on the Victorian branch of the ASW.
Thank you. And I think, Chloe, the first question is yours. So
I think it might be.
I'm not sure if the panel is saying anything just to start. We've got a series of questions.
Alrighty. So first question I have for you lovely panelists. Following on from those introductions, we would love to know a bit more about why you became a social worker and why you chose this profession. Anyone keen to start?
Okay. Okay, is this okay? Yeah. Okay, well, why I became a social worker was probably by accident. I certainly didn't intend to. I wanted to be a journalist. But in my day, the only women journalists were those who did the social pages, and there are only two of them, and they lasted forever. So I wasn't going to get in there. And I did go off to what was then the Melbourne Tech to do shorthand and typing. So I thought maybe I could do that. But when I finished up, there weren't computers and we had to do it without looking at the keys. And when I finished up with minus 40 words a minute, I thought, that's not for me either. And so then I came to the thing about social work, I have to say I didn't know a lot, and in those days was only taught at Melbourne University. It was only been going for about 40 years, and in Australia. And I remember being interviewed in Melbourne University, an old arts building, which was a tutorial room which had a platform and then a desk on the platform, and the people interviewing me were sat behind that. So I remember looking up to see them. But for me, the anxiety was the previous person being interviewed. I could hear gales of laughter coming out of the room. When I was there wasn't any laughter. I discovered later that they'd been interviewing the daughter of the Vice-Chancellor and previously. So anyway, I think when I asked what I wanted to do social work, I think I probably said something very specific like change the world or something like that. Anyway, I did get in. Yeah. So, but I wasn't a very good student. I was a very immature student, and myself and other immature students like me thought the best thing in lectures was rolling what were Jaffas, I don't know that Jaffas now, orange candy down the wooden floor from the lecture theatre from the top. And so I guess, got into social work when I went to the States and did my master's, which is another story. So probably that's enough. So what was your question again?
No, I think you've pretty much answered it. It was tell us why you became a social worker or why you chose the profession. So I think you've we nailed that one.
By accident. So.
Hi, I became a social worker by accident too, really. My oldest daughter, about 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, wanted to start uni, and as somebody who came from a family that had never had any family members who had attended uni, she had lots of questions and I had absolutely no idea, and all the friends I would ask would tell me different things. So I went, I've got 2 other children as well as this one, so I better figure out how to answer these questions. So then I looked at different jobs I might want to do, and social work seemed to be, the qualification that a lot of people in the jobs I was interested in had. So yeah, I guess I just went, okay, social work's the degree I'm going to do so I can answer all my kids' questions as they grow up and go through this journey themselves.
Cheers.
I'm going to carry on with the trend. It was kind of by accident that I became a social worker. And start by saying how intimidated I am to be on this panel next to all these very accomplished social workers. I spent a lot of my young years working with young people in the education sort of area mostly. Young people with disabilities mostly, and I thought that I would like to do child psychology. And I was not able to get into psychology, so I thought social work, I could do a year of that, and then I'll jump to psychology. And you'll all be aware that you do your psychology in the first year, but you also do things like sociology and social determinants of health. And it was within 2 or 3 weeks of doing a sociology course that I was like, this makes sense to me. Psychology was something I was interested in doing because I wanted to work with children, but the more and more I sort of lent into the lens that comes with sociology and social work particularly, I felt connected to it, and it felt like work I could really connect to. And I guess a lot in the theme of today, which is intergenerational solidarity. Throughout my early years in my social work education, I had a lot of mentors, and then since colleagues, far more experienced than me, or some starting out with me, and now people, I guess, younger than me. And what continues to motivate me in social work is that continued connection with all of my colleagues and mentors. It's our lens and our value base. I think it's more than just a set of things that we do. It's like it just connects my personal to my professional, I feel that connection with the other social workers I work with, and that solidarity, I guess, that cause that we're working towards as a profession is pretty much what, caught me first and kept me here, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, it wasn't my first choice either. So in the year 2000, I'd just come back to Australia as a newly married and heavily pregnant woman, being told that you can't go back to school. You're going to be a mum. You're going to be so busy. It's not possible. And so, as with all my definitive life choices, it was an up yours moment. Applied for quite a few things, and social work was what I got into. Initially was disappointed, believe it or not. But as I started the course and started studying, I realised that I'd found my people. I know, and we've had this discussion in some of my classes, you know, they tell you, you hear that line that do something that makes you happy and you never work a day in your life. I think the key is find something that aligns with your values. And if you're able to do that, if you find a career that aligns with your values, then you find that you're working in a space that's really fulfilling and enriching for you. And that's what social work is for me.
Well, Sal, seeing you've still got that microphone there, I'm going to ask you a question. Thank you all. That was terrific. What were some of the key concerns or challenges for social work when you started? And have they changed?
I think it depends on whether you're asking in terms of the communities that we work with or in terms of us individually as social work professionals. I mean, certainly a lot of the things that we were talking about back then in terms of the profession are still the same things that we're talking about now, you know, how we're valued, you know, how we're recognised as a profession. There's still things that we're talking about. And it's brought up a lot of conversations about, you know, being recognised and registered as a profession and what does that mean? It certainly hasn't meant that my wallet's getting any fatter. I'm still the person at Coles holding up the line because I'm fishing out my 5 and 10 cent pieces. And also, I guess, you know, and I can't understand why it's important because we work so hard to get to where we are, you know, why we feel it's important to be recognised as a profession. But I think we have to be careful about how we do that because what can happen is that, you know, if it's not done right, we risk alienating a lot of the people and a lot of the communities that we're working with, the people that we rely on for collaboration, the people that we rely on for the information and the skills and the knowledge about their communities without whom we can't do the work that we do. You know, are we saying we are the professionals and therefore, you know, thank you, but we'll take it from here? It doesn't sit well with me, and I think it's something that we need to think about carefully, especially as we push to try and get recognition or, you know, be recognised as a cog in a wheel of systems that we should be actively trying to dismantle.
Thank you, Saly. Jaryd.
Saly. I think leaning into what Saly said, I think the issues, to use probably two very overused terms, is the neoliberalism and managerialism that exists. I guess it's the political ideology that's dominated. Essentially human services for a significant amount of time now. And what I liked about what Saly said is that there is, for me, solidarity as social workers in not being a part of the professional establishment. I like the separation. I understand the motivation to be recognised as a profession, but I like the distinction also that comes with being a social worker, and the room that leaves us to act kind of in line with what I think are unique values as a profession. it's special, and that I think keeps me motivated, and I think keeps us in a position to work to challenge these issues that we continually outline and highlight as being significant and most impactful on the people that we're working alongside. So.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Jaryd. I mean, it's interesting because, yes, when I started, and as I said, social work was only about 40 years old, a major focus was on is social work a profession, and what are the characteristics of a profession, and the importance of values, body of knowledge, etc. That was very much part of what I guess the leaders in the social work were talking about at the time when I started it, and the importance of that, of recognising the values and what holds social work together, I think still does hold. I get when I first started and I went first to the Royal Melbourne Hospital as a social workers were paid as hospital scientists, so social work was considered as a science as well as an art, and that's sort of changed. But I think one of the things that I think has changed is that, not changed, but increased, is the diversity of social work and social work tasks. I remember my first placement, and placements, whether they worked out well or not, were always incredibly important, I think, for my learning. And the first one I had was at the Victorian Day Nurseries, which was providing free daycare for people who couldn't afford daycare and needed to work. It was terribly difficult to obtain. And I remember going there, and I'd be interviewing people and be saying, oh, you know, sort of really sorry for this woman, and her neighbours are really nasty. And my supervisor would say, oh, you know, she's paranoid, and hadn't thought anything about that. But on the other hand, so this supervisor had come from the government, and she was a social worker, and she'd stood in front of filing cabinets that had information about refugees when the minister had come in and wanted to give the information. So she got sacked, and she'd come to another role, which probably wasn't quite her forte, but it just highlighted for me the differences of social work and where the strengths are and the importance of those values. I don't think the issues have changed. I think inequality, racism, poverty, all those issues were there and still there. And but I think the contexts are changing. There has been change. There's sort of looking at changes, and I guess just sitting here makes me think of, I was fortunate that one of my mentors was Molly Dyer, and Molly was, when I first got to know her, was working at what was the Fitzroy Legal Service, which became part of it became the Aboriginal Legal Service, and she was just working so hard because of the stolen generation and helping people find sort of where they belonged, etc. And I remember once going in, and she just looked totally exhausted, and she said she had to go up to, I think, Shepparton or somewhere. And I said, oh, Molly, I can help you with this. And she said, no, you can't. You know, sort of. And then, you know, she said, you know, I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't, you know, it was fine. I could be a supporter. I could help her, but I didn't have the knowledge to go and do that work. And that highlighted to me the importance of different areas of knowledge. And we need to recognise what is the importance of social work knowledge, but also the knowledges around, and as a sort of Aboriginal community would say, the knowledges. But to me, it started building in me, what is it that I have knowledge as a social worker, which isn't be on an end all of all knowledge, but it's going to be an important component to see where it fits in different times. And that to me is what social work and value is about. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. For me, I completely agree that, you know, being seen as a profession, which I guess can sometimes be seen as not our main priority, but I do think we have a really valuable knowledge base. I do think what we learn and what we bring to any job we're in is an important sort of framework to put around how we work with our clients. For my community, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I think, unfortunately, the challenges are still the same. I think we're lucky that we're in Victoria particularly moved to this place where, you know, your Wilkin Treaty and things like that, the commitment is there to hear Aboriginal voices, and the understanding from funding bodies and stuff is there that it's only Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that can lead to real change within our communities, and you know that's amazing. But yeah, as far as the challenges for my community, yeah, unfortunately they haven't sort of improved statistically as much as we would have liked them to. But I mean, I'm hopeful, and I think what we do as social workers, you know, matters a lot to helping drive these changes.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. You all have just such fantastic insights into the profession, and I think as a new grad social worker coming in, it's really so important and valuable to listen to those stories. And so I guess this question sort of for me rides off the back of that, and I guess for probably lots of the students in the room coming into the field now, what are some of the challenges that you face as a social worker that are potentially different to the challenges that we've been faced with before?
Do you want to start? Does that matter? Do you want to?
Anyone who would like to.
You've got the mic.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're
I'll
welcome to
just
start,
quickly
Amanda.
say my bit. So I think, like you were saying before, as much as things change, they stay the same. I think challenges and that, you know, of the racism, and they look different, and we focus on different things. But I think, you know, I am a very proud social worker, but I do come from you know, a very proud Gomeroi woman as well, and look at through my work, even though I haven't always worked in Aboriginal spaces, I tend to be drawn back to them. So I'm always looking at what's changing and what's challenging in those spaces. So, you know, like I said, I think the commitment to the First Nation space and changing the outcomes is, you know, is amazing, but it's always going to be a challenge to balance that against legislation and a million other things. But I guess our world is always changing, and so the constant change and focused on issues that are sort of addressed and recognised socially are always going to be a little bit different. But I love the fact that now issues that in my generation were swept under the rug are sort of being brought out in the open and being spoken about, and younger people today and are just so, you know, so easy to talk about stuff that we sort of, well, my generation sort of hid a little bit in that. So, and I think social work's really pivotal to help drive that change and to make sure that we keep those issues from underneath the carpet and out in the open, and, you know, to keep them a focus so that our society can change for the better.
Thanks, Amanda. Well, I think it's a bit difficult for me to talk about challenges coming into a profession when I'm sort of at the other end, but I guess I see some of the challenges for the profession are firstly in education, social work education, that the social work is so diverse, and the challenges now in the community in terms of how issues are addressed, I think are major, and I think that coming into study must be quite challenging. To me, again, the importance of social work with its values and skills in relationships, and I hope that's something that social work always keeps to the fore, that working through building relationships and keeping that in mind, and having the skills and knowledge in relation to how to do that. I think, I mean, social work, as I said, wasn't something I came into. It came by accident, but it certainly became a passion of mine. And to some extent, I think, to me, at my end, I think it needs to be a passion in some ways, but whether that still can be, it's still the same with all the different demands, I don't know. But I think we know, for example, if you look at the work of someone like James Anglin with in residential care, where it's the workers who really care and, as he says, in quotes, love the children, who have the most impact, most positive impact. And so I think that's always going to be a part of changing communities. But I just think that it's a very challenging area to go into now, and it's fantastic that people are prepared to take that challenge, and I'm sure we'll address it really well. Hope so.
Yeah, I guess I'm still new in the profession, so the challenges faced by new social workers, I guess, are my challenges. I love, though, what was just said about relational social work. I think that's so important, and that's a unique approach of our social work. And as the pendulum swings politically, I think in the direction it seems to be, that focus is being lost, I think, in human service organisations. So the challenge for social workers, I think, is to keep being social workers and to keep working to our unique values and ethics in a political environment, in a funding environment, in a work environment that doesn't really like to make a lot of space for that. But it's a really unique and special part of being a social worker, and I think it's really heartening to be in a room with other social workers who do bring this approach. You can see that it can be unique and really impactful. So yeah, for I guess young social workers like myself and a lot of people in this room, yeah, I would say the special part about our profession is, along with our kind of unique knowledge, is our unique value base, and just lean into that and yeah, do that.
Okay, challenges for the baby social workers coming up through the ranks, I think personally, is not losing hope when things feel like they're getting a lot worse. So 15th of March marked the International Day to Combat Islamophobia and recognition that worldwide Islamophobia has increased quite a lot. And that comes off the back of, having many, many years of state-sanctioned Islamophobia. I mean, it's a lot easier to kill innocent populations overseas when they're framed as an evil other, and then forgetting maybe or knowing that we also have populations living amongst us, and what does that mean for them? So 15th of March was also the 6-year anniversary of Christchurch. And you would think, following a tragedy like that some changes would be made and some things would be put in place to protect people from that level of hatred. But what we're seeing, especially post October 7, is that things have gotten a lot worse. And the Islamophobia Register have just released a report on that. Incidences of Islamophobia have increased about 700%. So yeah, they're the challenges. Things are, in a lot of places getting a lot worse for people. And I think, the important thing is, we have the skills, right? And we have the knowledge, we understand what's happening. We're critical thinkers. We are best placed to be able to combat a lot of these issues. And so I guess the main thing is to not lose heart, keep working, even if it's uphill.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sally. This next question is actually sort of a bit of a pivot from all these fantastic answers, but I'll give you guys a rest from the challenge-based questions. Sort of in line with today's theme, which is building intergenerational social work solidarity for potentially the communities you work with and for I guess the other professionals you work with, what are the domains that intergenerational inequity and inequality seem most pressing for you? Sally, you're welcome to start, but if you want a break, you're welcome to handball it.
That's interesting because it's not just within social work, but, as in society as a whole, we're looking at intergenerational inequity. It does certainly feel like things are getting worse in a lot of domains, and, things like poverty and the environment are the two clear examples that come to mind. We have a lot of work to do. And this generation of social workers is going to be fighting really hard. And a lot of times it's going to feel like you're kind of mountain climbing Everest. But I guess the key is to kind of just persevere. Forgot what the question was. I don't know if I've answered it.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you, Sally.
Thanks, Sally. I also found there's a difficult question to think about. But I guess what's important to me, or what I feel is really important in terms of inequity, and it's absolutely intergenerational, is inequity of whose voice gets to talk about the problem and define the problem and the solutions to the problem. And the voices that are centred are never the voices, or very rarely the voices, that are most impacted by a problem. And I think that inequity, it's an inequity of power, I guess. And if there's a fundamental social work value that's really important, I think it's about centering people as experts of their own experience. And if our work can centre the voices of those who've been excluded so often, I think that would go a long way to addressing a lot of other issues.
Thanks, Jaryd. I think that the importance of voice is something that really needs to come out, and voice and agency, people being able to speak for themselves. And I think that social work, something that social workers can assist, because we know the difference between speaking for someone and assisting those voices to be heard rather than our voices being heard, whether we always do it. I think it's terribly complex. I think all the domains, political, wellbeing, environment, are all major challenges. In terms of intergenerational solidarity, how do we address that? And to me, one of the things is keeping in mind that when we're talking about intergenerational, we need to have each generation in mind when we're talking about it, because the babies of today are going to be the old people at some stage, and we're building a world for them, as well as looking at what it is now for young people. I think it's important that there is dialogue, that the voices are heard, and as social workers we recognise, I think two things. One, obviously the political environment at the moment is, I think, quite frightening. We've gone for quite a while thinking that democracy, whilst not perfect in any ways, it's the sort of way that we'll be living to. I think we see that being challenged in lots of ways now, and that's something that has to be worked through. And I guess the other thing is that in terms of the environment, and change in the environment are going to impact on the most vulnerable, who've always been the major concern for social work, and how policies, etc., deal with that is something that is going to either increase the dangers and the risks, or maybe lead to some changes.
Hi. So yeah, I guess I agree with everybody. There's so many pressing issues and, you know, we've got to be political as social workers. It is, you know, part of our responsibility, I feel, anyway, as social workers to get involved in that political space. And I think that's challenging for us, particularly within the confines of some of the areas we work in. But for my community, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I guess, in this intergenerational space, you know, we've only sort of, I was born in the 70s. We were only sort of close to getting anywhere near the same rights as others in the 60s. So it's sort of been in my generation that, you know, we've sort of even had that level playing field to start off with. So for us, just trying to catch up to everybody else is, as far as financially and socially and all that is, you know, obviously a challenge, but for us to also teach our young people culture that we weren't allowed to practice for so many years and ensure that we can teach them that and pass that down to them and keep it alive while still ensuring that we're moving with the times, like all cultures move on too, you know. So it's for us a challenge, and for social workers working with our communities, the challenge is how to support both of those sort of, you know, being in the modern world with all its problems. But I do think, again, putting, you know, First Nations communities, whether it's in Australia or other First Nations, stuff like the environment, and that it can be such a amazing way to help reverse some of these problems, because, you know, First Nations communities across the world have the answers. They, you know, allowed environments to thrive and that for a very long time. So I think it's back to, again, holding up the voices of the people we're working with and using that skill and that expertise to then drive, you know, how we move forward in our modern world.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple more questions and then we'll open up to the audience. So how do you balance personal wellbeing, professional activity, and social work professional commitments to social justice? Probably something students would be very keen to hear about. So who would like to start?
You have to repeat it.
Okay. How do you balance personal wellbeing, professional activity, and your commitment to social work professional commitments to social justice?
So for me, my personal wellbeing, you know, like all of us, family, friends, things like that. I also get a lot of joy out of watching new social workers and just young people in general. Not that all new social workers are young people. I'm not implying that, but I just love the way, you know, young people today and new graduates, particularly social work, come out so positive and so full of hope. And, you know, and we get that it's a challenge once you get into the real world of social work, but that positivity and the way people these days are just so open to new ideas that, like I said, were challenging to us, that fills me with so much joy and so much hope that, you know, I really do believe we're going to be okay if we keep having people come into the profession like I see coming into my role and stuff. As far as social justice, like I work in a legislated space and I work for a government, and I think I am a social worker no matter what role I'm in. I see myself as a social worker first and foremost. What job I'm doing doesn't define who I am. Social work defines who I am in my profession. So ensuring that I'm always upholding and putting those social work values on whatever role I happen to be doing is, and particularly, like I said, at the moment, I'm working in a government space, allows me to feel like I'm upholding social justice because I apply those theories and our values and our ethics to the way I deal with everybody across my organisation as well as service users.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I guess I think, yeah, just in terms of well-being as a social worker, I think if you didn't really like what you were doing as a social worker, I think it would be very difficult to maintain well-being, because I think you need to involve yourself in lots of ways. So to me, it's having that passion and, you know, sort of really wanting to do what I'm doing as a social worker, that's really important to well-being. I think it's also, and this can sound a bit trite, I guess, but being aligned with the values of social work as well, that you see how they are part of the way you want to live your life. Whether you do, I guess, is another thing. But that sort of comes through. And then I think in relation, if social justice, it's very much, I mean, I think social work's about caring, and if you're caring, then you want justice for all. You want a just world. If you really care about people, care about things, you want that across the board. And it recognising challenges to that. But I mean, that to me, and I can't help thinking that it's the small things you do in your life as well. And now, sort of, I'm not always working at the dog walking group that I walk with, just a casual group in the morning. And yet we do have discussions about issues in relation to refugees, the Aboriginal community, and it's putting forward views and sharing views and promoting social justice in a very small area. But I think all those areas are important as well, and what contributes to wellbeing as well.
Immersing myself in rubbish TV on my commutes home. But other than that, I complete. No.
You're missing out.
Yeah, I've been told. No, I think other than that, the distinction between personal well-being and social justice and my profession are pretty fluid and vague. I think coming down and doing things like this is really great for my well-being. I'm lucky enough to teach a class in social work, and being around social work students, like's been said, getting to spend 3 hours talking to really passionate young social workers or new social workers is really great for me. I think, putting myself in environments where I'm around people who have that same connection to social work, or just the personal and professional values that I have, is really nice, because I think if there's something that can feel overburdening, it's that often I don't see my values reflected in a lot of places. And so finding those, so for me, my work is hugely great for my well-being. I feel immense kind of privilege to be doing social work. So I guess I have my own sort of personal switch off things, but other than that, I think, stuff like this is what's really great for my well-being as a social worker.
Yeah, I am, feeling a little bit hopeful, seeing how much more openly we talk about well-being, our own well-being and mental health, which is a lot more different to what it was when we were graduating a million years ago. I have been known to partake in some rubbish TV, as well as some other maladaptive coping mechanisms when things are really bad, which I will not reveal right now. You do what you need to do to get through, because some days are going to be amazing, but some days are going to be really bad, right? And you need to remember to take care of yourself, during those times. I think, in terms of social justice as a whole, you'll find that when you are kind of thinking more about self-preservation than you are about your values as a social worker, you will feel icky when you're doing the work that you're doing, and you tend to feel a lot better. You might be unemployed, but you will feel a lot better if you do stand up and speak out. I might not have a job, or I might have a hostile working environment, but I will be sleeping at night. And I think that's key for me. And that's how we make change, right? Because your silence will not protect you. It was Audre Lorde that said that. And we see that more and more as we see a lot of our personal rights being stripped away bit by bit.
Thank you. I just have one more question. You've all done a very fabulous job. And I might actually riff on this one a little bit, because we've talked so much about challenges already, and I think you gave Just some really wonderful in-depth answers. So the original question is, what do you see as the grand challenges for social work going forward? But I'm going to give you guys a strength-based question instead and ask what your kind of grand hopes are for social work going forward.
My hope for social work going forward is to remember that large part of what we do is look at systems change, and we need to go back to our advocacy roots. And I think some of that has been lost along the way. And I guess the impact of that has been that we're seeing, a lot of our human rights being stripped away. And I mentioned this before, we need to go back to doing a lot more of that advocacy work, that social action that we were seeing coming out. There was a lot more of that happening in the 70s. I feel like, just remembering, we are also advocates for social change, and we need to focus on that as well.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, couldn't agree more. My hope for social work is that we lean into advocacy and activism, and we are a force to resist, I guess, the kind of political change that we're seeing. I mean, not that it's always been great, but we are a profession with our value base that should be resisting the types of things we're seeing across the board today. I think leaning into that we are a political profession, and that we have a really important perspective and knowledge base that I think finding our voice in that political space more and more would be a great move for social work moving forward.
Okay. Thanks, Jaryd, and I agree with what's been said. I guess I'd like to sort of follow on and take a broader view. I think I said at the beginning in my interview about doing social work, I want to change the world. And so just a minor thing, I'd really like to see social work become an international paradigm, its values and knowledge be recognised across the board. And I realise that's a dream, but I think that the essence of social work has to offer, the caring, the values, the social justice, is something which could make a difference if it was promoted as one of the international paradigms. But I guess, and my hope for social work too, is that all parts of the diversity of social work are recognised. I think social work's political, we have to speak up, and we can't not be political, I don't think. Even not speaking up, you're being political. So I think everyone's political, but recognising that there are lots of different roles in social work. To me, perhaps one of the risks for social work is seeing that only some parts are social work and others aren't. And I think it's seeing what social work as a whole can contribute and what is that knowledge base. And again, as we move into more sort of recognition of evidence, and as I said, when I started, social work was seen as a science. Maybe that was a bit of a big call, but it was. And how we're dealing with evidence now in relation to our values and our pursuit for social justice, I think is a challenge and something that I'd like to see us address really strongly.
I can't think of much else to say that everybody hasn't already said, except I guess that, all of the above. And, I just hope that us sitting in social work now help taking that fight. Our jobs are so busy now. I don't know a job that we do as social workers that aren't busy and that don't take up so much. And I think for us to have the ability and the energy to, live our lives, but also get into those more political and, broader societal discussions, we have to fight for our rights to be able to do our job in a way that is sustainable and that allows us to do our job as social workers and not just another, person pushing people through whatever system we happen to be sitting in. So, I'd like to see us to keep fighting for, for that, for all of us and for all of our colleagues, before and after that, that get sort of lost in the systems that we get pushed into as social workers. So,
Thank you. On to a round of applause for our fantastic panel.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. We haven't got access. I don't know how to access the chat so that we can see the questions from the 15 people who've joined us online. And sorry, I ducked out. I was trying to sort it out on my phone, but it seemed to backfire because then it was mucking things up as you were talking, Sally. So I'm sorry about that. Kim, are you coming out to help sort that out? Because that would be lovely. If that were possible. In the interim, perhaps anyone who wants to ask a question could email Alex Batal. I'm sure you all know Alex. Alex is going to look on her email and yell out any questions that you have while we sort out the trap. Okay, it is a.bhathal@latrobe.edu.au.
Excellent. But we'll have some questions. Michael.
Thanks, Maureen. I'll just talk loudly and say the emailing Alex other end. So I guess.
Look, like I said, I am just amazed by younger people today, like the kids, but I mean, the younger people, the new graduates that I work with, I'm just so amazed by the way they see the world. And that makes me hopeful because I think, we're so lucky to be in a time where so many things that are always not seen, not talked about, not heard, that were considered shames are just accepted. And I mean, maybe it's just showing my age, but that wasn't how I grew up. And I'm just so hopeful that, some of those things that so many amazing people have fought for the same rights, in so many different areas of life, people accept now. And I could be wrong, but I don't see the judgment that I remember of so many things that I grew up seeing. So that makes me really hopeful. And for social work, like I said, I do think a lot of people are drawn to it who have those values. And then I think once they get into it, it gives them the skills to be able to get out there and actually fight for it. So.
Okay, then. Yeah, look, I guess what keeps me hopeful is, yes, sort of looking at and engaging with younger people and seeing how they are looking towards the future. But I guess it's also in relation to social work that I think there are achievements from social work that can be recognised. And I think that it's that recognising the values, the importance of seeing issues almost before they arise and starting to work on them, and that there are a lot of committed people in the profession who want change. And I guess that's what keeps hope going, even when things can look pretty challenging and difficult, which I think at the moment they are. But I think as a profession, it's still uncovering new knowledges, recognising how values can be expressed. That is what keeps hope going.
Thanks. Hard to add to that. I think just if anything, resistance. I think there's always resistance, and to some pretty awful policies or social justice issues, and there seems to be a real willingness, whether it be in whatever way, whether it be amongst hardened social work professionals or young people or whoever it is, there does seem to be real willingness to resist those things, and it's nice to see. It makes me feel hopeful.
Thank you. As someone who's technologically challenged, I just am in awe of young people and the way they've been able to share access and, information about what's happening all over the world. Young people know what's happening in Palestine. They know what's happening in the Congo. They know what's happening in Sudan. And that's through their ingenuity, through their use and mastering of social media. The establishment is no longer in control of the narrative, and that's really been quite amazing to see. I remember because, for a long time I had no social media, looking at my daughter's TikToks, and you'd see the description being, "My car is for sale. Please share if you are interested in buying," or knowing someone who's interested, but the imagery, what you're seeing is, images coming out of Gaza. And that was the way that the young people were creatively being able to get around the algorithms that were designed to kind of suppress some of that information that was coming out. So I'm feeling very hopeful because how we view the world, how my parents view the world, and how young people view the world is very different.
Thank you. Excuse me. What's your advice on staying connected to the social work profession when you don't often work with other social workers?
I think that's what makes it easier.
I don't think that's what you were meant to say, Sal.
That's why you have Mike.
Yeah. I mean, getting involved, doing things like this. There's there's a local branch at your ASW. There's lots of practice groups. There's you could come teach a class at La Trobe and hang out with social work students. Or create your own communities. I know of. I currently the only social worker working where I am, but I have a lot of ways that I feel connected to my profession, and it's through all those. I've got ex-colleagues that I love to just banter on a social media chat or catch up, or some things that are more organised. Whatever it is, however it is that you feel you can best. I like to write, so I've done some writing, but whatever it is that you do, I think actively try and engage and be connected, because it's really nice to feel connected to the profession. Like I said, it's what keeps me here.
Thanks, Jaryd. Yeah, look, I think it is staying actively connected. I also agree with what Saly said, that in some ways, when you are the sole social worker, in some extent, it's almost easier to maintain that social work identity, because you really do have to think about what it is, what do I, as in this role, as a social worker, have to offer, what is it when others aren't. And I guess as an example to me, and this is years ago, but when I was first working in the States, and I was working in a community health centre where I was the only social worker and also the only white social worker, the only white worker in the clinic, which with what they call paraprofessionals, now people with lived experience. Well, clearly, firstly, I was Australian, so I didn't know the States. And secondly, I hadn't lived in the conditions that my colleagues had lived in. So what could I offer? They didn't want research. They said this was in New Haven and they'd had Yale University doing research, and they said all those people went on and, their careers built up and our situation's still the same. And so it really did make me think, well, what is it that I have to offer? What can I give? And that pushed me back to think about what are the social work values, what's the knowledge that I can contribute to this situation. And so in that sense, it was really helped me build my identity as a social worker.
I think I've been quite lucky that I've worked in a lot of spaces where there have been other social workers, and for my friends sitting here, I'm sorry, but I seem to collect other social workers on the way. Even if when I move from the job, they're the people I seem to, just naturally get drawn to each other, and they're the sort of relationships and friendships you seem to maintain once you move on from the job. But I mean, I know the year we graduated, we had a social work group that does still post updates about jobs and try to organise catch-ups and that. So, I don't know if everybody has that, but I would hope that everybody does. So there's, and if you don't have it and you're still at uni, create it so that you've got those connections and that space where you can post stuff, even if it's not all the time, it's nice to have. So, yeah.
Another online question. Thanks to the panel, wonderful discussion. I'm wondering if you can identify the daily acts of resistance that you draw upon to keep you going in the work.
Could you repeat that?
No. Thanks to the panel, wonderful discussion. I'm wondering if you can identify the daily acts of resistance that you draw upon to keep you going in this work.
The
Daily acts of resistance. You stand up against the system on a daily basis.
Yeah, good question. Again, I think it's if you're seeing how you see the world and the importance of justice, I think what you listen to, what you read, how you engage with others in relation to that. I mean, you're not always seeing people, but I think it's what you can do and the small acts of resistance in terms of what you do, the solidarity that you feel where you can take action to make a difference, but you can't always do that. When we look maybe at what's happening to refugees, what action can you take? But you can be looking and exploring what is the situation, what could be possible solutions and support for people. So I guess it's just being very much aware of how you sort of keep working to build a just world by all your actions.
In my current job, but honestly, in all of my jobs, I think my small act of resistance is every day making sure I'm able to sit down and not let the work overwhelm me and actually sit back and reflect and put the social work lens over everything I'm doing, to not get caught into, the busyness, because they're all going to be busy, the busyness and the manicness that our work sometimes entails. Do you know what I mean? And I think by doing that, we're working with the people we walk alongside so much better. Well, I don't know about better, but so, in such a more holistic way than if we're just trying to get people through whatever system we're in. And I guess in my personal life, the way I social work values are my values. Do you know what I mean? And I live it, and I try to. I don't always, but I do try to live it, as much as I can, and I teach my children it, and I surround myself with people who aren't necessarily social workers but live by those values as well. So.
Yeah, totally agree. Case notes, great way to, as an act of resistance. I think it's really important how we communicate with other professions, and that's a great way to do it and play your social work frameworks. But I think also recognising it in the people we're working with. I think there's always resistance to injustice, and the people that I've been lucky enough to work with have, I think have often demonstrated that in really inspiring ways, and finding a way to work in solidarity with that is a really great way to promote resistance as well. So.
Thank you. I think for some of us, existence is resistance. Working in spaces that were not created with us in mind is resistance. And for myself personally, it can be something as small as rocking up to work in my keffiyeh. And other times it's challenging those casual racist remarks, those misogynistic remarks that are made, in the staff room. But also I think as well, thinking about how I use my time and utilise my time, the activities that I engage in voluntarily, for example, the Anti-Racist Social Work Collective is a large part of the way in which I'm able to kind of continue in my daily acts of resistance and activism.
Thank you very much. We've got one question online and just time from one more from the audience if there's any. Ewan.
Around me. Basically, my worry is that very optimist to like somebody who just like the only real only real morality in like a full. How do you like try to not be worn down by rapidly changing conditions? I'm going to ask this question. Very first week of health services organizations. What the hell? It's like,
Thank you. Your question, Ewan, and we'll get one of the panel to respond because we're just running short of time.
what do you try to do to not be worn down?
I think, and that's a really good question. I think part of it is having that awareness that the world is a shitty place and it's really unfair. It's a very different place to when I was growing up in the 80s where everything is rainbows and roses. And if you just work hard enough, you can get to where you need to be. It's understanding that it's, those inequities are there, and understanding that helps you kind of work within those systems to try and bring about meaningful and effective change. I think it's a lot worse if you don't have an understanding or, aren't able to have a critical worldview when it comes to how the world works, because then it feels really overwhelming and you do feel incredibly powerless and you question yourself and how you're doing things, and you tend to blame yourself for a lot of the things that go wrong. So yeah, rather than it being a problem, I think it's actually a really good thing that we are more aware.
Can I just ask the next question for one other person from the panel to answer? Lloyd, what was your question? You're happy to pass? Okay, there's one online, so we've just...
Alrighty. So this question, and again, I'm happy for any of you who want to answer it. You do not all have to. I find as a social work graduate researcher in sexual violence that other researchers around me don't respect the social work profession. What are your tips to advocate for social work perspectives to be more highly regarded in this field of research? In your other work as well.
That's research. Jump in on that.
Would you want to respond to the other?
Oh, well, yeah, the only thing I would add is find your people. It's really cathartic to find a group of people who recognise just how shit that is and to just talk shit about it for a while. And that gets me through a lot.
Okay. And I'd agree, and I'd say to both questions, it's jolly hard work. It really is. And, in relation to being the sole social worker and other researchers not recognising social work perspective, it is continually putting that forward. It is seeking colleagues, others who can support that. But it is really difficult, and it's really difficult when when you're on your own in relation to your question and the importance of, and I think we do learn this in social work, the importance of groups, of communities that you can gather around you to support you, of your colleagues who are supporting you in that, and recognising that to get change can be really, really difficult, and it is unfair and unequal, and it is getting support to deal with that whilst you continue to try and challenge it, and getting engaged with organisations, volunteering, that they can make changes to policies, etc.
Okay, we've got one more question online which is very similar, so I'm hoping that I think Brad will have addressed that question. I think just say thank you again. That was fantastic.
So thank you so much to everyone for coming. For those of you who came in late, my name's Professor Sarah McLean. I'm discipline lead, new discipline lead in social work and social policy at La Trobe. And I just have to say today made me feel so proud to be a social worker. So thank you very much to our panel for giving us such a wonderful opportunity to celebrate World Social Work Day. So first of all, I would just like to thank Chloe Dillon, who is a former student. Thank you so much, Chloe. Chloe graduated last year and we're really proud to have her here today. Thanks so much for coming. And also everyone knows Associate Professor Maureen Long. Thank you very much, Maureen. Maureen is a long time academic at La Trobe and coordinator of our Master of Social Work. So now to our wonderful intergenerational panel. First up, thank you very much, Amanda Tully, for coming today. These are tiny little presents, but we hope that they kind of signify hope and growth into the future. Professor Margarita Frederico, thank you so much again for coming along. Jaryd Stobaus, thank you to you. It was really great to have you here. And then finally, to Saly Alman, thank you. A huge thanks to you, Saly, as well. So I am really hoping that some of you, not those of you who are online, obviously, because we can't send tea and coffee down through the internet, but those of you who are here, we hope that you'll join us for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a biscuit and hopefully a bit of a chat to our panel. So that should be set up for us out in the foyer now. But just in closing, thank you again all for coming and happy World Social Work Day. Oh, actually, sorry, I forgot. And also big thanks to Alex and Karen who did so much of the organising. How did I nearly forget that?